All right, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are still awake and to have all the energy you need for the next conversation I want to have with Fred. So, Fred, first of all, great to see you.
Oh, great seeing you in Germany, finally.
Yeah, finally. So I want to start our discussion with a small anecdote. Okay. So we met the very first time in Zurich. I think it was November or so. And back then I pitched you the idea of the Masumi network. I don't know if you remember, and I told you Masumi or AI agents in general is the single biggest opportunity to drive blockchain adoption. And I can remember you looked at me with big open eyes, like, what is this guy talking about? And for many of you, probably you don't know what Masumi is. Masumi is simply something we have developed, which is a so-called agent-to-agent protocol. So it allows agents from different companies to find each other, to work together, to pay each other, and to hold each other accountable. And this is what we have been building, and now I promised you in November that this will be a big deal for driving adoption, especially across traditional enterprises. And now I'm super proud to say that we already have over 500 traditional enterprises who are using now agents running on the Masumi network and therefore also running on Cardano. So I know that when you started your job 5 years ago, right, you said, I want to have a big focus on driving adoption and driving growth. So I'm super curious to hear now your point of view of the last 5 years, maybe the next 5 years. How do you see adoption developing of blockchain in general, and how do you see Cardano being positioned for this?
Well, that was a very short question, huh?
Yeah.
Well, basically, I think what happened in blockchain was that we had only one blockchain who really had some value in it, and that's Bitcoin. Everything else was sort of just trying its way forward and was trying different use cases, and some of them succeeding more than others. But in essential, we were seeing we're taking from the earlier panel, we're taking TradFi and putting it on a blockchain, and we call it DeFi. But it's actually exactly the same. Same incentive models, same problems. We're not really doing anything new. And what I was aiming for 5 years ago and said, there is utility in blockchain, but we need to really go into the engine room, the boring place, the infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And I think this is exactly what Masumi is a good example on, right? Because Masumi is not selling blockchain. No. Masumi is not even mentioning that they're using blockchain when they go out to hundreds of German Mittelstand companies and selling them digital transformation. But some of them are then saying, oh, hold on a second, are we really secure? What about our supervisory authorities? What about the stock exchanges, because we are listed on a stock exchange. How do we do that? What about digital identity? What about verified credentials?
Yeah.
And this is really what we are seeing now in the age of blockchain, right? We are seeing that blockchain before was this word everybody was talking about, is now falling behind, right? So it's no longer about what blockchain can do for you. It's what lacks of enterprises in the utility can blockchain actually solve. And I think this suddenly changed from being a technology looking for a problem to solve to another technology called AI agents having a huge issue, and blockchain can solve it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the title of our session is Trust and Transformation. And I think you could say that basically what is happening right now in AI is probably the biggest transformational technology we might witness in our lifetime, right? Nevertheless, it has a big trust issue right now. I think on LinkedIn, everyone this week was talking about a study which the MIT was launching together with another company, which the name I've forgotten. But the gist of the study was to say that companies see at the moment very little impact on their P&L from AI. And the reasons the MIT has been quoting is that basically there's a big hesitation of adoption of the technology. And the same, I think a couple of months ago, the CEO of LangChain, if you don't know LangChain is probably the biggest framework people are using right now to build AI agents. And the CEO of LangChain, he gave a keynote and pointed out that the majority of proof of concept, they don't make it from proof of concept into production because people don't trust the technology yet. Right, so that is a massive opportunity, obviously, for blockchain to step in. How do you see this evolving?
So I think, AI agent is going to be the Google Maps for blockchain, right? Mm-hmm. So we all hoped, at least everybody who was in this awesome stadium, we all hoped there would be cryptocurrencies, right? We thought the cryptocurrencies would really do this for blockchain, but it just hasn't yet. We basically have Bitcoin, and some people are arguing stable coins, but stable coins is not it. Huh? So what we're seeing right now is this huge epiphany moment, right, where we finally, we understand everybody, is using ChatGPT, Grok, Gemini, and whatever, but everybody also understands that this thing might be lying to you. It's very often, and when the stakes go up, it will be lying to you, right, because it's basically trained on the internet, and the internet is non-verifiable data, and most of the incentive model there is basically shit in, shit out, right? So you can have the best LLMs in the world, but if this is the data lake we are looking into, it just won't work. So as the stakes go up and people see, okay, the AI has utility in a way I can understand and feel, which blockchain didn't for everybody, right? For you, of course, you all feel it, right? But for everybody out there, they understand the LLMs, right? What's going to happen now is we have to bridge the gap from not just how do we do a better user experience with an agentic AI, right? And there is something we can do in technology, but we need to change the incentive model of the underlying data lakes. Plus, we need to allow companies to collaborate across companies. So we don't get into a situation that, I don't know, Facebook or some Chinese player, they operate Germany, and they become the German infrastructure. We need to get to a situation that the Mittelstand, for instance, can stay and have communities and contribute to the local communities and have jobs, but collaborate with this global technology. And the only way of doing that is safeguarding that with really, truly decentralized blockchains.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've been talking the last 6 months to all our major clients, right? To companies like Lufthansa, Generali, BMW, and we all talk to them about basically what is happening in agentic AI. And one of the key problems they see is like accountability, right? How can I basically make sure that an agent who did something for me can be held accountable for what happened, right? So agents say something, agents do something, and if you really want to embed it into critical business processes, you need, or you are in search now for mechanisms of how to make it traceable what happened and how to verify it, right? And that is one of these things, I think, which resonates really well with enterprises that, yeah, this is something what we want. And then suddenly, if you say, yeah, and by the way, blockchain technology is perfect for this, because there you have immutable storage, right? You can write hashes of what was happening. Then suddenly the hesitation disappears and companies say, okay, perfect, then let's do this, right? And you are not getting into conversations around monkeys on or monkey pictures and crypto speculation, and they even don't have any kind of preference for what kind of blockchain technology you want to use, right? They just want to make sure it is safe and secure and does what they want.
Yeah, but I also think it's an easy story to tell, right? It's much easier to explain that if you have a small company who has a very limited data capacity is going to run an AI agent, right? And this is going to share private identifiable data with a large company where you're going to generate a common user experience with, but this large company has unlimited data resources. And then the question from the CTO or from the security or the CISO is often, what about this asymmetric relationship that my AI don't have a lot of computing power, this has unlimited, it can just send 1 billion prompts in a microsecond and we'll figure out how to get the loopholes around it. And this is really interesting because we can solve this with micropayments. And not only can we solve it with micropayments, we are doing that with Masumi, right? Mm-hmm. So we can really use the blockchain as intended to cover some of that gap, and we can explain this in a completely different language than when we go out and we speak about, different indexes around, nobody controls money and all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, today, in a lot of sessions the topic of identity came up, right? And I know that you are quite passionate about identity yourself. And what I believe, I'm always joking when I talk about Masumi, that basically blockchain is a great technology, maybe it has been invented for the wrong audience, right? Maybe it's too complicated for humans to use, there are too many obstacles, but suddenly AI agents, they benefit from all of it. And I'm making the same joke about identity technology. For how many years do we have now the decentralized identifier standard DIDs, right, from the VW3? For how many years do we have verifiable credentials? Still, I don't know a single human who can show me their identity run on this technology. But now, suddenly, this might make a lot of sense if you basically give agents identity, if you give the creators of agents identity, and these kind of technologies suddenly start to see adoption. So how do you think this whole topic of identity will evolve over the next years? Does it get a second chance, so to say?
Well, I don't know about politics here in Germany, right? But when you look at it from abroad, it's really safe to say that, identity is going to be the one thing we cannot get wrong if you want to have accountability towards emerging technology.
Yeah.
But identity is not one person, one identity. This is not how it runs, right? Because we have different personas. So I'm a dad, I'm a board member, I'm a CEO, I'm a part of a Verein. I run different agentic AI models on Masumi, right? And all of that I need to manage different identities, right? So from satellite data to agentic AI, right? These identities become more and more crucial because this also is the only way we can make things accountable. So when, for instance, you have an AI who wants to defend itself against being shut off, right? It's going to replicate. But if it can then also replicate that identity, you have a huge security concern. So this ability that you can actually run the DID or an identifier by the company, and you can be 100% sure that that is that AI model who is collaborating with the Lufthansa AI model, who is basically speaking to Hertz, right? That becomes absolutely everything you need. Otherwise, it won't go through the European Parliament, and you won't be allowed to run this at scale. So identity is really the part which makes everything accountable, and getting that right and ensuring that you can manage that and roll that up in large enterprises is absolutely needed.
Yeah, and I can also say from experience, you don't get through the compliance check of any company, right? If they can't make sure who sits behind a certain agent, right? Then basically the game is already over. We had a chat before we did the session on the outside when we were drinking coffee, and the other thing I think people are absolutely underestimating right now is the importance of really reliable, high quality data sources, right? If you are using ChatGPT today, right, ChatGPT is still being trained, obviously, on all the public data in the world, right, apart from all the lawsuits they are getting right now. But you can already predict that the next wave of what is happening right now is that all the big LLM vendors, including OpenAI, Claude, Mistral, whatsoever, they will start now to package offers which is tapping into premium data sources, right? I know from my job that so many people who are selling data or who are selling content, they are negotiating right now with all these companies to make deals that when you talk to ChatGPT, you have access to high quality data. And I think this will drive another need for a blockchain and another need for identity on chain, because you need to connect not just what you said, are these agents really from these companies, but you need to have verifiable data that you can point to the point, especially in times where we have so much possibilities with AI to create data and content like crazy, which doesn't have to be true, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people is actually underestimating the amount of value you're sitting with if you operate a layer 1 or a layer 2 blockchain, right? Because not only do we have a different incentive model, so the likelihood that we have more high quality data because it costs something to produce and lock that data and to maintain that data is incredibly high, but also we have this idea that we can do verifiable data, right? So using oracles or DIDs or VCs or other means, we can go in and verify that data, and that data becomes much more valuable for machine learning and for agentic AI. So an example is the Cardano Foundation has, for 2 years now, basically put all of our financial records. So our salary payments, our rent payments, our financial transactions, when we buy and sell Bitcoin and ADA, all of that we put on the blockchain, right? And now we're basically speaking to our auditor, and our auditor is technically giving us the green light to use the highest level of digital identity, which is called the LEI. In our world, it will be the virtual LEI, which basically is moving 80% of all world goods. So if you're moving a container from A to B, there will be 2 LEI numbers involved in that, right? So 80% of all world trade. And they're basically saying, yeah, we are actually okay with the data conformity on Cardano and the Cardano Foundation, that we'll be willing to go in and sign off that all of the data you published on the blockchain, that's the data we made the financial audit on. Yeah. When you step one step further, right, you think about NAV files, you think about banking accounts and all of those things, you get to a situation that you have multiple third parties, established trust providers, which we essentially not always like in this room. They're going in and verifying that data, and there's a business model in that. And that will then help the agentic AI that you can delegate much more tasks because you know the outcome is going to be much more reliable, which means you can again increase the value you can capture through that user experience.
For sure. So let's talk a little bit about stablecoins, also apparently a popular topic. So I'm talking now to companies who start to sell their data on Masumi, right? So we have, for example, Statista, which probably all of you know. They are already selling statistics over the Masumi network. We have just launched GWI, which is not so well known outside of the realm of marketing, but GWI is the biggest seller of data about audiences in the world, and they just came onto Cardano and Masumi and start to sell now their data. And at some point in these conversations, they are asking me, Sebastian, how do we get our money, right? At this point in time, it's always the time to say, okay, you need to run your Masumi node, you have a wallet, and you will be paid in stablecoins. Right? And then you look into MTIs because most people outside of this bubble have no clue what stablecoins are. And then we always explain it. And it's always great that you can point now to MiCA and you point to the Genius Act in the US and you can give them some peace of mind and say that there is apparently now a regulation in place which makes it more compliant and is quite makes it clear of how you can do these things and that they can just go to an exchange and exchange this for fiat. And this was the point in time when we started Masumi where I was most nervous about. I was like, oh shit, when it comes to this conversation, probably everyone will drop off. And the opposite is happening right now. It's absolutely mind-blowing. We are announcing more traditional media publishers and news organizations from Germany who are launching in this month their data and their content on the Masumi network, and none of them has any kind of issue with getting paid in stablecoins. So for me, it is great to point to these regulations, but I know that you have a much more differentiated view of where are we with this, right? So I'm just curious to say, curious to ask you, like, okay, what do you think? What still needs to happen to bring more adoption to enterprises for these kind of use cases from a regulatory point of view?
Yeah, so specifically for Europe, right? What we really need is we need principle-based regulation, and we need regulation who enable growth and enable job creation in the European Union. And why am I saying that, right? Because the outcome of MiCA, even though we were at the table as the Cardano Foundation, we were very much alone, right? So we were there together with regulated, TradFi companies and exchanges, right? Mm-hmm. And they said, don't worry, we are regulated, right? So it has to go through a regulated entity. And we were like, well, hold on a second. What about all the use cases who does not need to go through a bank? Right? Who does not need to go through an official, settlement process as such. Why are we saying that all stablecoins de facto has to be treated as a security, right? Mm-hmm. And I think what really needs to happen is that we as an industry, as a blockchain industry here, right, we need to be way more cognizant that, if we want to stay in Europe, right, and we want to enable this emerging technologies, whether it's AI, quantum, or blockchain, or whatever that might be, right? We need to go to the regulators and we need to show them all these use cases, which is not just finance. It's not just we wrap a security in a new way on the blockchain, or we tokenize it, or we fractionize it, or we do all the things we've done the last 50 years in finance. We just now use the blockchain and some more fancy words, right? So we need to take some of these real use cases, which you also find when you walk around on this floor, and you need to speak to your local politician and regulator and talk them through what this actually is, right? Because if we get to a situation that big tech and deep tech is leaving Europe, well, then most of us will also leave Europe, right? And that might be okay for some people to live on the beach somewhere, right? And we want to move every 5 and 10 years. But I think what we really need here, we have a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of manufacturing. There's a lot of industries here who can really be enabled by AI and enabled by blockchain to compete on the world stage and bring back job creation and money to their local communities, like where we are right now.
So perfect. Look, the sign is blinking to indicate that our session is over, and you perfectly answered my last 2 questions I had written down on my notes already in your last statement. So thank you very much for the time, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation, and obviously happy to talk later.